Tuesday, February 19th, the Capital Investment Committee will come to order. First item on the agenda today is Representative Sauke, the Rochester International Airport funding. And with Representative Sauke is Mayor Norton. Welcome to the committee, Mayor.
Thank you.
Please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did make it through the snowstorm finally. It's been a snowstorm every Tuesday for about a couple of weeks now. We wanted to share a little story that I think draws attention to what the issue is. This is for a new set of lights for the main runway. And that becomes significant for whenever we have the marginal weather days. And a little story that goes with that is a spinal tap taken from a overseas patient, young boy. That spinal tap test was being flown in, and they got to Rochester and they couldn't land. And most of you, I think, understand that a spinal tap is not the most favorite thing for any individual to have to undergo, nonetheless, a small boy. That test got sent back, so he had to go back through the test again and had to be brought through, and they were finally able to land. And I think that really underlines the issue of the runway improvement for landing so that we can certainly land planes in much lower visibility circumstances. So I'm going to share, that's the only thing I'm going to share that I think brings your attention to the urgency of this, of why it's really important, and it's a significant improvement for the airport and its business. I'll introduce
Representative Sauke, maybe we could have detoured the plane to Duluth.
It's hard for us to then put a hook on a building and drag the building up there for the tests.
I bet.
That was the part where we couldn't quite figure out how to do that. So, thank you, Ms. Chair.
Right.
I'll introduce.
I didn't offer.
I'll introduce our mayor, Tim Norton.
Mayor Norton, welcome. We knew you as representative, but
You indeed
mayor
did.
is a new political experience altogether, isn't it?
It is, and it's wonderful to be back and see everyone again, staff and legislators alike. So great to be here. So Chair Murphy and members of the Capital Investment Committee, we appreciate the opportunity to provide some insights into the needs of the Rochester's airport. As you might be aware, the Rochester International Airport had the second largest number of commercial passengers in the state in 2018. It's a hub for freight distribution in southern Minnesota and probably even a little northern Iowa, and it creates business operations within our region. We have an excellent team of testifiers today. I'm just kicking it off, and we'll hand it off to some experts. City Council President Randy Staver, Airport Director John Reed, and Paul Drucker, who's the Senior Director of Mayo Clinic's Air Land Ambulance Operations, and the person who leads Mayo's Aviation Unit. Paul will talk about the important role of that Rochester International plays in ensuring quality patient care throughout the country. And in short, the proposed project involves the enhancement of the airport's navigation systems and makes improvements to the cross-runway setting the stage for pavement improvements to our primary runway in the future. As you can imagine, this is a significant priority that has benefit to the state and region, as well as you just heard from Representative Sauke, to many patients around the world. As the support for the important stakeholders, support includes the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce. They aren't here today, but it is important to them as well. And so I think probably it would be best to hear from some of our local experts, and I think Randy Staver will be the first, Madam Chair, if I can share my chair.
Councilor Staver, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Good.
Chair Murphy and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. House File 659 is part of a broader financing strategy to leverage federal, state, and local funding for two critical and urgently needed improvements to the Rochester International Airport. As Mayor Norton referenced, one of the project elements is to enhance the navigation systems at the Rochester International Airport to help avoid unnecessary diversions, but also better position Rochester to accept diversions from Minneapolis Airport. As a leader in medical testing internationally, it is important to minimize diversions to ensure that important medical specimens can be tested in a timely manner. This ensures that diagnosis and patient care can be as timely as possible for all of the medical providers that rely on medical testing as part of their patient care. In addition, we've been in conversations with the federal government to rehabilitate the existing runway at the airport and to enhance the cross runway so that service can be maintained during the rehabilitation of the primary runway. Mr. Reed will provide more detail on the pavement challenges that currently exist in a moment. Finally, I would just like to end by making a couple of comments based on previous requests. MnDOT previously provided funding of $1.5 million to help design and begin construction on the Category 2 navigation system. The overall project cost is estimated at $52 million. We're asking that the state partner with the city to finance the projected non-federal portion of $12 million. We would respectfully request $7 million through a state appropriation or bonding. The city is currently able to fund and is committed to funding $5 million necessary for the project. Ultimately, this partnership will better help Rochester International Airport continue its critical role in supporting medical passenger transport, medical testing, and freight coming into southeastern Minnesota. On behalf of the City of Rochester and Rochester International Airport, we appreciate your thoughtful consideration of our request. And now at this time, I would like to introduce our airport manager, John Reed, who will provide some additional detailed information pertaining to our request. Thank you.
Councilor Staver, just one more time, go over that breakdown. $52 million
Is the total cost.
total cost. $12 million is the local cost, or the 12 million is what
Is the
you have to
non-federal
put in.
cost. Chair Murphy, the total cost is $52 million.
Yeah.
The federal government would be covering roughly $40 million of that. That leaves $12 million remaining. The city of Rochester is committed to providing 5 of that 12 million, so we would respectfully request the state funding of the remaining 7 million.
So federal 40 million, and then that leaves 12 million. And the state, you're asking the state for 7 million, and
Yes,
the
ma'am.
locals would put in 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where's that money coming from?
We are funding that locally out of our capital improvement and other funding sources that we have, we've identified within our city capital improvement funding.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Reed?
Good morning, Chair Murphy and members of the board. My name is John Reed. I am the Executive Director for Rochester International Airport. And in your packages today, we did provide a project description. And I would draw your attention into the third page. And you can see some of the effects that we're having on the runway itself. The runway is approaching 30 years old. It has reached the end of its useful life. You can see actual chunks of the runway here that were on my desk. And so we are a very busy airport, especially related to the healthcare field and needs. FedEx comes in daily with specimens coming out of from around the world through Memphis into Rochester, to say nothing of the commercial activity from Delta, American, and United. We did hit a record year for passengers last year with well over 370,000 passengers, so the place is very busy. Again, just to reiterate the breakdown, the federal government is indicated $40 million as their level of investment towards this total project. We are asking respectfully for $7 million from the state of Minnesota, and then of course the balance of $5 million from the city of Rochester. What we would be doing is the rebuilding of runway 220, and then the finishing of the Category 2 instrument landing system for the airport. And if there's any questions, I would take those. If not, I would turn this over to Mr. Paul Drecker.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Reed, how many flights do you have each day in and out?
We have 13. We have four flights daily to Minneapolis, St. Paul, 7 flights a day to Chicago O'Hare on American and United, and then 2 flights daily to Atlanta on commercial activity.
So without me doing some math, what is the yearly total? How many in a year? 13 times?
13 times 365.
Representative Fooley will figure that out.
Yeah. I'm an aviator, not a math guy.
4706.
Yeah. That's just on the commercial side. That's not counting air cargo or air ambulance or all the general aviation activity.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Drucker.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Paul Drucker. I am a registered nurse, and I'm also the Senior Director of the Mayo Clinic Ambulance Service, including both ground and air ambulances. Chair Murphy and members, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of Mayo Clinic in support of funding to reconstruct and extend runway 0220, as well as add improved navigation aids to the Rochester International Airport. This legislation is of vital importance for thousands of patients seeking care at Mayo Clinic each year. Many patients and employees travel to and from Rochester by commercial airline every day, making the Rochester International Airport a key feature for efficient day-to-day operations at Mayo Clinic. As well, Mayo Clinic Laboratories depends on the Rochester International Airport for delivery of patient specimens from around the world, upwards to 40,000 samples with each delivery. When weather limits delivery or requires diversion of an aircraft to another airport, the quality of the specimens is threatened because the biological material must be maintained within strict parameters. Complications in the delivery process, which place specimens outside the parameters, may mean that patients are required to complete additional tests, increasing cost and causing subsequent delay in diagnosis and care. Mayo Clinic has produced a wonderful 5-minute video highlighting the process of specimen delivery at the Rochester International Airport through the analysis in the laboratory, and I'd respectfully request members and direct you to mayocliniclab.com and search Beyond the Berry Box for an overview of this process. As well, Rochester International Airport is one of the busiest destination airports for airplane air ambulance operations in the country, and certainly in this region. Over 750 patients arrive by airplane air ambulance each year, many of these flights completed by our own Mayo Clinic airplane air ambulance. Mayo Clinic deploys highly specialized teams on this air ambulance to begin Mayo Clinic before the patient arrives in Rochester. These flights may involve newborns with complex issues, transplant patients who need help after transplantation with complications, or maybe in the throes of an acute organ failure, and also patients who are experiencing acute lung and heart failure issues requiring extracorporeal membrane oxygenation therapy, or ECMO therapy. These are typically the sickest patients that we fly on our airplane. The patients arriving by air ambulance are typically experiencing a life-threatening crisis, and as you can imagine, these flights occur at all hours of the day and night. Therefore, airport capacity and resiliency are extremely important to help ensure patients arrive safely and timely. Just in the very recent past, we had approximately a 36-hour delay due to weather complications to get a very, very sick patient into Mayo Clinic that infrastructure may have helped with. Currently, our Mayo Clinic airplane cannot use the existing Category 2 approach into runway 1331 until the lighting upgrade is hopefully completed with the funding we are discussing today. Replacing and extending runway 0220, as well as addition of a Category 1 approach to runway 0220, speaks to the airport resiliency we need to help very sick patients. Earlier in my career as a flight nurse, I saw firsthand how important it is for patients and their families to get to Mayo Clinic in their greatest hour of need. Our patient care teams often point out the Mayo Clinic buildings and hospitals through the windows of the airplane when it's on approach to the Rochester International Airport. What usually follows is that family member or the patient, if they're able, are overcome with emotion because they have arrived at a place of great hope. A very humbling experience to witness for certain. In summary, this project will be of great benefit to patients, many of them originating from around our own great state and in need of what only Mayo Clinic can provide. I thank you for your time, and we all stand ready for questions.
Thank you, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe this is more for Mr. Reed. Can you tell us is there like an official partnership or relationship with the Mayo Clinic? Because I'm hearing it in the presentation now. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a unique way of running the airport. The facilities themselves are owned by the city of Rochester. The airport is run and operated by the Rochester Airport Company, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Mayo Clinic, founded in 1938. So the clinic's long been involved with the daily operation of the facility.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just kind of just following up to that, can you tell us how often do you receive patients coming in from, the metro area like Hennepin Healthcare or North Memorial, just so that I have an idea? Those are the hospitals in my region, so I'm just curious.
That might be a better question for Paul.
Yeah, I'm not prepared for exact
Drucker.
details, sir, but I believe knowing the number of helicopters, I was speaking specifically of air ambulances that are destined for the airport, but there's about 1,500 to 1,800 helicopter operations destined for St. Mary's and Methodist campus, and about 400 of those are delivered by North Memorial or LifeLink or other services within Minnesota, patients originating from around the state. A handful from the Twin Cities. I would say that that's probably the lowest proportion are patients moving from the Twin Cities to Rochester, but greater Minnesota certainly from all over.
All right, Mr. Reed, Mr. Drucker, I think Mr. Reed, for $7 million, we're buying new blacktop, we're buying new lighting, and what else?
You would be buying a concrete runway. Yes, concrete. The new lighting for the Cat 2 ILS to runway 1331, and then a Cat 1 ILS to 220.
And has the planning and engineering been done already?
That is underway as we speak.
Representative Pearson.
Good morning, Mr. Reed.
Mornings.
Good morning. And just to get a little bit of perspective, what other airports in the state of Minnesota have this type of system, or above and beyond what we have in Rochester?
The Cat 2 ILS. There's currently a Cat 2 ILS in place in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth.
So, Madam Chair,
Representative Pearson.
to the chair's point, it would actually be safer for them to have been diverted to Duluth and land safely in Duluth than to currently land in our Rochester Airport during inclement weather.
That is correct.
And Madam Chair,
Representative Pearson.
and how does the capacity of the Rochester Airport compare to the capacity in the number of flights daily to the flights that are in and out of Duluth? Do you happen to know that number, or is there anyone?
It just depends on how you're going to measure it. In relationship to passenger capacity, RST is now the second busiest airport in the state. I don't know the number of aircraft landings in comparison to Duluth. We're somewhere around 45,000 annual operations of aircraft landing and taking off. It's a pretty significant number for an airport of this size.
And thank you, Madam.
Representative Pearson.
Madam Chair, thank you. And again, not to highlight one city over another, but simply that we're we certainly have the capacity to justify a similar system to what the city of Duluth has. And again, the urgency for many of our visits and those samples coming in, I think, is something that should be highlighted to the committee.
Thank you. And I would add to that, it's not money. It's not a project just to spend money. When you begin to look at the value of the time spent in regards to the weather that actually happens in Rochester, I've worked around the whole United States. This is probably the worst place I've ever lived for weather. I lived in Green Bay for 13 years. When the weather comes down in Rochester, you cannot get in, and the Cat 2 ILS begins to negate those issues, especially for those people who are very ill or have real urgent business in Rochester.
And Representative Pearson, there is fog in Duluth sometimes, occasionally. Representative Dean, we're over now. But go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. You know, we have several airports, and if I'm not mistaken, MSP tends not to come and ask us for bonding money. Is there something different about the structure of the main airport in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that's different than Rochester and Duluth, and that and some of the other areas, Hibbing, some of the other airports that have you coming before us today?
Sure. I probably could answer that one better, and I can't speak, on behalf of the MAC, but as an airport operator, the significant revenues that are generated, I would call them ancillary revenues that are generated in a Minneapolis, St. Paul versus a Rochester or Duluth are significant. We just do not generate those types of revenues. There's just no ability to do that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right. Madam Chair, thank you very much, and members of the committee, thank you very much for your time.
Next item on the agenda is number 6, Representative Robbins. Representative Robbins, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members. I appreciate very much the opportunity to come before you with our bill, House File 544, which would provide a pedestrian and bike bridge over I-94 in the city of Rogers. I want to honor the chair's request that for my first bill hearing, we do not provide treats to the committee, but with your permission, we are going to pass out some lapel pins from the city of Rogers. I'm very proud to represent Rogers, which is one of the fastest growing communities in Minnesota. We currently have around 11,000 people, but when I-94 was first built in the 1970s, there was approximately 600 people there. Current projections are for the city to grow to about 18,000 by 2030. To safely accommodate this growth, we really do need this pedestrian and bike bridge. I have been to the overpass. The city is bisected by I-94, and to connect the two parts of the city, this is just essential. There is a crossing at the busiest intersection at 101, and I have walked it, and it's kind of terrifying, and I would never let my children cross it. So I just would like to introduce my guests who can provide much more detail for the committee. We have Mayor Rick Ely from the Mayor of Rogers and Steve Stalmer, our city administrator. Thank you.
Mayor Ely.
Good morning, Chair Murphy and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to the Capitol today. My name is Rick Ely, and we're here to talk about the Rogers I-94 pedestrian overpass project. I've been the mayor of Rogers for the past 6 years, having served on the city council before that. In my years on the council, we have helped solve countless traffic and roadway safety issues on the state and county roads, as well as local city streets. We have built trails connecting residential neighborhoods, jobs, parks, and schools. But one obstacle we have not been able to overcome yet with regard to that connectivity has been the daunting I-94 corridor, which has divided our city in two since the early 70s. For that, we need your help. As With the past city-state partnerships, the city stands ready to commit significant funds, but we cannot do it alone. The project before you today will result in significant and much-needed safety improvements while connecting important segments of the city of Rogers and the surrounding area. With that being said, I will turn things over to City Administrator Stamer for the presentation of this.
Mr. Stamer.
Chair Murphy, members of the committee, thank you for having us today. Again, my name is Steve Stamer. I'm the City Administrator in Rogers. The desire to provide communities with what they need to prosper most has been a common theme from both sides of the aisle thus far this session. The Rogers I-94 pedestrian overpass represents one such opportunity for a city that has historically invested in local as well as regional infrastructure without the assistance of local government aid or fiscal disparities dollars. Rogers is requesting a $2.2 million state bonding project for an estimated total project cost of $4.4 million to construct the I-94 pedestrian overpass bridge. A little background on Rogers. Representative Robbins, Mayor Ely had mentioned. The I-94 segment through Rogers was constructed in 1972 when Rogers' population was approximately 600 people. Today, Rogers is one of the fastest growing cities in the state and is currently projected to be approximately 18,000 by 2030 and 22,800 by 2040. We are not unique with regard to growth. There are other growing cities in the metro area, but we're also not a sprawl-related bedroom community. We have more than 10,000 jobs and are home to the Rogers High School, which serves the cities of both Otsego and Rogers primarily. With I-94, 101, and County Road 81 all converging at the 94-101 interchange, Rogers is one of the busiest traffic hubs in the state of Minnesota. Today, I'd like to cover two basic points of why this infrastructure project is so important to the city and we believe should be important to the state. Those points are safety, first and foremost, but also connectivity, connecting people to jobs, to schools, and connecting them to other people. The only pedestrian crossing connecting the north and south portion of Rogers across I-94 is the 94-101 freeway-to-freeway interchange, where major east-west roadway, County Road 81, also converges. The geometry of that intersection, and you can see some of this in the handout that was provided, page 1 and page 2 in particular. The geometry of the intersection is such that drivers heading from I-94 west to 101 north cannot see around left-turning traffic. That traffic blocks the view of pedestrians or other vehicles passing through the intersection. So nearly all right-turning traffic from 94 west to 101 north is pulling into the intersection, pulling past the crosswalk blindly. They literally cannot see. It's more than a 90-degree corner. And I watch this happen every morning on my commute to work, and every morning I pray that there's no pedestrian coming across at the wrong time. To avoid crossing this harrowing 94-101 freeway-to-freeway interchange, some youth are actually driven to crossing using a 6-foot-high, 400-foot-long MnDOT stormwater culvert, going under Interstate 94 as opposed to over. There's a picture of that as well on the front of your packet. Water consistently flows through this box culvert and spikes during rain events. It's a very dangerous situation, but it's apparently become more attractive to our kids in the community due to the location and due to safety issues at the existing 101 crossing. So the risk of pedestrians or cyclists using that culvert is very real. It cannot be gated off or blocked off in any other manner because of blockage issues and flooding concerns with the large watershed that it drains. So with 94 and 101 being the only crossing of 94 in the city and unsafe even for pedestrians and cyclists, as Representative Robbins posed, we would just ask, at what age would any of us allow our children to cross that existing intersection? There isn't another option in Rogers. So many pedestrians, especially children, are relegated to one side of the city or the other, unable to walk or ride their bikes to school or to simply visit a friend without someone driving them across town. Beyond safety, connectivity is a real driver for this project. The majority of Rogers' population actually resides on the south side, but 3 of our 4 schools, including the high school and middle school, are on the north side, along with the majority of jobs, parks, ball fields, and retail and entertainment destinations. The proposed crossing is also an integral aspect to the cross-community trail vision providing connections to city and regional trail assets, and also connecting residential areas to workforce nodes on the north side of 94. So if there were no I-94 corridor, the cost to the city of Rogers to construct this relatively short segment of trail is probably in the order of a couple $100,000. So even with a $2.2 million local match, that's a very large number for Rogers with a annual city budget of approximately $8 million to spend to create safe passage and to reconnect our community. The burden of building a bridge over the major freeway corridor is a primary rationale for the city seeking state bonding funds for the first time. Also, if I-94 were constructed today, the city would request or possibly require that a dedicated safe pedestrian crossing be part of a municipal consent to construct. The existing 94-101 walkway cannot be brought up fully to current standards for both pedestrian and bicycle requirements, and if constructed today along with other safety standards, that crossing would require a minimum of a 12-foot wide walkway, which is double the current width today. In closing, I would like to point to a nearby example of a dedicated pedestrian bridge, that being on Highway 169 in Champlin. That bridge was built in 2002 with state, city, and federal funds. That was built after a pedestrian death. We at the city are very hesitant to use the "people will die" mantra that we often hear. We get that as often as the legislature, I believe. But I think it's safe to say that we would all rather see a bridge built, in this case, before a pedestrian death in Rogers and not after. With that, thank you for your time and consideration for this important project. This project is the city's #1 infrastructure-related project, the City Council's #1 priority. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So you're asking for how much?
$2.2 million in state bonding for a $4.4 million project.
Okay, and so what happens to this adventure trail through the culvert?
Well, we hope that because of the adjacency of the proposed bridge crossing, it is in that same general area. We hope that the bridge will become much more attractive than this. As you can see, it's actually filled with water most of the time. We believe that having the dedicated bridge in that same area will prevent those crossings from happening.
And what, Mr. Stamer, what communications were made with DOT on this plan rather than the culvert plan or the leave the kids stay on our side of the road?
Sure. So we've had, for the last several years, we've had ongoing discussions with MnDOT. We've actually had some correspondence go from our federal delegation to Chair Zelli over the last few years. The simple lack of a dedicated funding source there from MnDOT has prevented anything from proceeding. I believe, at least that former Chair Zelli, former Commissioner Zelli, saw this as a priority as well, but simply did not have a funding pot of dollars. We have pursued federal funding through the regional solicitation, through the Met Council, based on criteria, scored very low in that screen. But we believe that in applying other criteria, primarily, as we said, safety and connectivity, that this is still a vital project.
Were these meetings well attended by the public?
We haven't had any open public meetings on that. We were trying to identify a path forward at some point. Those would be things that could absolutely be part of a process moving forward.
So this hasn't been accepted by the people?
I wouldn't say that it hasn't been accepted by the people. I know that our city council and staff as well are contacted frequently by residents talking about the unsafe nature of the 94-101 crossing. We haven't workshopped it to a point because we haven't gotten to a design stage, but at some point that would need to be done as well.
Okay, so tell me about this rendering picture.
Yes.
At the bottom of the page.
So that's a visual representation of what the bridge would look like if constructed. That is the area that is currently approximately 1 mile west of the existing 101 and 94 crossing. This would be, that is the current design, if you would. Again, it hasn't gone through full design, just has been drafted as an option and as an ability to get to a cost estimate. But that is the proposed location. It actually does go over a fairly new MnDOT sound wall that was built a few years ago as part of a highway expansion project.
Has this been okayed by MnDOT? This
No,
rendering?
yes, we haven't gotten that far as well, Chair Murphy.
So we're talking 2020.
Potentially, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Mayor or Mr. Staumann. Tell me the status of the Brockton project, please, and how this could interface with that.
So the Brockton project, my understanding is that is slated for 2020 construction. I believe there are still some local dollars being figured out on the city of Dayton's part, that project being entirely in the city of Dayton. But my understanding is that is slated for a 2020 construction. Quite a bit, that project itself is quite a ways east of this project, actually east of Rogers, not even in Rogers at all. There is the current stretch of I-94 through Rogers is approximately 5 miles long, with 101 being the only crossing. So this would still be the only dedicated pedestrian crossing in the city of Rogers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that you came.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the little button. And we'll be in touch. Representative Freiberg, House File 100, Golden Valley. Welcome, Representative Freiberg. Tell us about your project.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for considering House File 100. This bill would allocate some funding for improvements at the intersection of Highway 55 and Douglas Drive in Golden Valley. This is actually a statewide issue. The Purpose Center for Arts Education is located right at that intersection. That's our state's high school focused on the arts, as well as Art Development Center. So we have students from all over the state who come there to attend that school, and the school provides assistance to teachers working in the arts all over the state as well. It's a really busy intersection. Highway 55 gets a lot of traffic going from downtown Minneapolis to Golden Valley, Plymouth, suburbs further out and back. So you see students crossing there all the time, and it's not always a desirable way of crossing and place to cross, and actually residents cross there as well. I actually live on the north side of 55. My parents live on the south side of 55. I cross there regularly to get to my parents' house, and I don't always feel safe doing so, especially when I have my kids with me. You know, the mayor of Golden Valley, Shep Harris, is here to talk about it. We will actually be requesting an amendment. Some of the language in there is no longer needed, but the mayor can describe that some more. We'd be glad to take the committee on a tour of the area and have everyone attempt to cross the highway there too. So that's pretty much all I need to say. So if I could turn it over to my testifiers, starting with Mayor Harris, that would be great.
Mayor? Welcome to the committee, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Freiberg. Members, my name is Shep Harris. I'm Mayor of Golden Valley. Yes, I might be a familiar face to some of you around here. I do happen, my moonlighting job is Mayor of Golden Valley. My daytime job, I am up here as an advocate for a number of organizations. So it's a pleasure to be up here in front of you wearing a different kind of hat. Thank you, Representative Freiberg, for bringing the bill forward. And of course, I want to thank publicly our co-authors, Representative Carlson and Representative Winkler. The City Council is united on this issue. We have been working on this issue. I was talking with our city engineer, Jeff Oliver, a few minutes ago. This bill has been around for about 4 years. And so we do have some changes coming forward when appropriate and necessary. I understand the bill is in the Transportation committee so we can make the amendment there. But basically, we have already done the construction work of 1 3/4 miles of Douglas Drive. That was a project that we had started a number of years ago, and we've now completed it. What we were trying to do with this bill was coordinate that construction job with this request. So that's why in the future there'll be a few lines here that will be struck out. But to the point that Representative Freiberg he was making about Highway 55. For those who haven't been to Golden Valley, just like your communities, it's a beautiful community. We have idyllic neighborhoods, beautiful neighborhoods, safe community, above average children, great schools. But we are also surrounded and bisected by state and federal highways, Highway 100, Highway 394, Highway 169, and last but not least, State Highway 55. It literally does cut right across from east to west our community. And so the big challenge is not so much my major concern and the council's major concern. Sure, we have responsibility to help our residents and connect our north and south sides, but truly, and unfortunately, we don't have the video this year. We have played it in the past. For some of the veterans on this committee, you might recall seeing it. For the new folks on this committee, we're happy to show it to you, email it to you. It's a couple minutes. Or, as Representative Freiberg said, take you across Highway 55. It is a daring and challenging situation, to say the least. It's 7 lanes of active traffic on a regular basis. And I have to say, as elected officials, there's times when we are confronted by a situation which compels us to act, not by choice, but by a necessary circumstance. And I would say that this is one of those situations. We have a responsibility as a state to these children, to these families that attend this state institution, whether it's the children, the high school students who are commuting by bus, get off in a very precarious situation right off of Highway 55 and try to cross the lanes, as well as the students who are staying there on campus who might want to go into downtown or go west and then on their way back attempt to make this dire travel across Highway 55. So I urge members to try to include this, Madam Chair. Hopefully, if there is an omnibus capital investment bill this session, we hope that maybe the 4th year is the charm, and we'd appreciate some funding so that we can help protect not just Golden Valley residents, but equally we can protect all of our kids here in Minnesota who attend this state institution. Thank you. And Madam Chair.
Harris, I just was really caught unaware about this. In preliminary discussions, I never heard about roundabout. You're asking this committee to build a roundabout?
Yes, Madam Chair. And if I may have that question answered better by our city engineer, Mr. Oliver, I think he can explain why.
Oh, he's an engineer. Engineers love roundabouts. But has public testimony indicated 100% favor of roundabouts? Mr. Engineer?
Madam Chair, yes, this project does include a mini roundabout on the south side, immediately adjacent to the driveway to the Purpose Center for Arts Education. This intersection is extremely close, like 50 feet from the through lanes of Highway 55 eastbound. Very little room for turning traffic. Traffic from the south includes one of our primary links to Interstate 394 on one of our state aid routes. We experience significant congestion at this intersection and a high crash rate. While the crash rates on the north side of the intersection were addressed with the Douglas Drive reconstruction project, which ended last year, the south side has not. Our modeling and our projections include dramatic reduction in crash occurrences, as well as significant reduction in the congestion that we'll experience, allowing more people to pass through the intersection rapidly.
So are there going to be sidewalks around the roundabout?
Madam Chair, yes, there will be, in addition to the pedestrian underpass, which connects the north side of Douglas to the south side, and the art school. there's full trails and sidewalks on Douglas Drive to the north, as well as both on and off-street facilities to the south.
So the kids will still be going through a culvert?
Madam Chair, that is correct. The vast majority of the Metro students for the Perpetuate Center are reliant on Metro Transit to get to and from campus. It's my understanding that they don't stay on campus. So the westbound traffic turns north on Douglas Drive, and then those students need to get off the bus and cross the highway. They're currently crossing 7 lanes of traffic, often against the traffic signals when its signal is not in pedestrian crossing mode.
And Madam Chair, if I may just draw your attention, this is the, thank you, Madam Chair, this is the primary sheet that we want you to look at. There was some confusion. There's an additional drawing in there which you can ignore, but this is the primary one. What I really want to draw your attention to is it's hard to see on this sheet, and that's where the video could be very helpful. The kids will literally huddle together in the median, in the middle of the highway, because they're either crossing against the light, or in some cases, the light changes so quickly, they're caught, they're trapped in the middle. And frankly, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic, members and Madam Chair, but I am surprised that there hasn't been an accident yet. I hope there never will be, but you would see this is the importance of why the pedestrian tunnel is so needed. And Madam Chair, we do have a member here from the Perpetuate Center if you have questions for them as well.
Representative Dean.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Freiberg. I drive this stretch of road quite often. It's kind of a mess. I also ride my bike in the area. That's really a mess. And to the comment about the roundabouts, if I'm not mistaken, what, about a quarter mile north is a new roundabout at Golden Valley Road and Douglas Drive, and people seem to be doing pretty well with that roundabout. So I think most of the people using this area of the city are already familiar with roundabouts.
But this is just a mini one.
Well, so Madam Chair, the issues will only be mini issues then.
Yeah, thank you.
$6 million is not a mini, in my opinion, but what do I count?
Well, Madam Chair, I'm sure the $6 million is for the whole project, not just for the roundabout.
Correct. I would imagine the underpass might be the more costly endeavor there, and that you are correct. There are 2 roundabouts along Douglas Drive as you go north there. I live right in that area. I drove on the southernmost one just on my way to get here today, and people seem to have caught on, as you said, Representative Dean.
People are very indigent, very smart. Mr. Oliver, do you have a presentation other than answering questions?
Madam Chair, I think most of my points that I had prepared have already been discussed. However, I would like to add that our city recently, as part of our comprehensive plan, formed a resident committee to evaluate and make recommendations to our city council for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. This was ranked very high in the list of priorities, primarily due to the nature of Highway 55 and how it does bisect our community. They believe that the proximity to the Loose Line Regional Trail and the Grand Rounds that are connected via the Loose Line in Worth Park and the entire Minneapolis Park Board system make this an incredibly attractive project from the bicycle and pedestrian perspective as well.
So if all those things are going on, how has it come, and this has been 4 years in the planning, how has this come about that you're making the request for the full $6 million?
Madam Chair.
From the Capital Investment Committee.
Madam Chair, at this point in time, our community is in the midst of, as being a first-ring suburb to Minneapolis that developed immediately after World War II, the vast majority of our development occurred then. as well as the construction of our infrastructure. We're completing reconstruction of our street system, and we've got significant investments in front of us for the remaining infrastructure, primarily the sanitary sewer and our water system. We are actively looking for other sources to fund portions of this project.
Madam Chair.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've been a House member I'm in my 7th year now. I spent 9 years before that on the Golden Valley City Council, and particularly the underpass is something that's sort of been talked about going back to my time on the city council there, but it's something that the city has not been able to fund. So as I mentioned, it's an issue of statewide importance given the presence of the Purpose Center there. And Mr. Johnston is here from the Purpose Center, and I know he'd like to say a few words too if possible. But it is something that I think there's a real need for. The city's been unable to do it on its own, and so assistance from the bonding committee is important because there is a real safety issue there.
Mr. Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Thomas Johnston. I'm the Finance Director at the Purpose Center for Arts Education. And I just want to express the Purpose Center's show of support for the Highway 55 Douglas Drive project. The safety of our students at our school is of the utmost importance to the agency and to the school. Schools are an asset to neighborhoods, and safe access to those schools should be a priority. We feel that completing this project will enhance the safety of our students and staff at our agency. We appreciate our relationship with the City of Golden Valley. They are neighbors and partners in a shared vision for a thriving community, and we support their efforts to enhance public safety. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, you and I are both on the Education Finance Committee, as are others in this committee, either on policy or finance. And while we haven't had a presentation in Ed Finance yet this year on the Purpose School, prior years have indicated a declining enrollment and some challenges there. So the future of the Purpose School is not guaranteed. Is this project necessary if there is no Purpose School in that location, or is it strictly because of the school that this project would be needed?
Mr. Johnston.
Madam Chair, if I
Mayor.
kick you out there, Thomas. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Thomas. Representative Jurgens, thank you. That's an excellent question. Based on the conversations that we've had with the Purpose Center, they're making every effort possible to boost up their enrollment. And even my opinion is, and I think the City Council would agree with me on this, is even if the Purpose Center wasn't there, the fact is that you have a state highway that in essence has created this challenge for us all. And it's our responsibility, I believe, to try to make sure we have safe passage for anyone who's trying to go over, or in this case under, that state highway. So even if the Purpose Center wasn't there, there would be some future development. Prior to the Purpose Center, it was the Lutheran College, where a former famous coach, maybe a former representative might have gone there. Current representative, but former student. Current representative went there. So it has multiple uses, past, present, and even in the future. I think the key issue here is the state highway and our obligation as a state to try to provide safety to our citizens who are trying to cross over or under it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. My question would be for Mr. Oliver, the engineer. Having had some experience with mini roundabouts and large trucks, is there a lot of truck traffic in the vicinity of this mini roundabout?
Representative Torkelson, there is a limited amount of truck traffic. Primarily would be deliveries to the Purpose Center. There are other routes we see in this area because of the proximity of 394 and Highway 100 and Highway 55, that most of the heavy truck traffic accesses our community via those, and then onto some of the county roads and our collector streets. Not a high level of truck traffic on this particular intersection.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Oliver. I would just encourage you to make sure that you have accommodations for trucks, because when one comes along, I've seen a number of road signs fall victim to heavy trucks in the vicinity of many roundabouts.
Duly noted.
Representative Lilly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Freiberg. Thank you for bringing this. It's been a problem for a long, long time, and you're correct. I did go to that little Golden Valley Lutheran College there way, way back when. But and Representative Albright as well was a former alumni there. But it's been a problem since then, and extremely dangerous. And again, I would support your comments on just how dangerous it is and people standing in the middle, because it's about 10 lanes there or something, it seems like. And it is I think you've been lucky that someone hasn't been hurt, actually. But thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Number 7 on the agenda, Dakota County. Well, were you successful in the other committee, Representative?
I didn't have an, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't have another committee. I had a meeting I had to go to. But thank you for
I thought you had Bill up.
No, not, I do have a couple bills up today, but.
You have a famous guest with you today.
Who? This guy I gave a, no. Anyways, Madam Chair, members, thank you for letting us come in and present our project. This is House File 609. This would help us complete the Mississippi River Regional Trail. I like to go with a story here because I think that's going to kind of.
Nice story.
You know what? I knew that. And so this actually happened to me this year when I was out door knocking. I had a family that actually came up to me, and they weren't from the area, but they were looking at moving into the area. And they were talking about how Minnesota really is attached to its outdoors and how they really have made the trails very accessible. And I dug a little bit further, and then another family member came rolling out as she was in a wheelchair. And they talked about how the trails in Minnesota are very accessible, except for they had the family out on the Regional River Trail over there in Rosemount, and they said they had to go to a stop point. And I said, well, what happened? And I knew about this, but I didn't know what they were referring to. And they said the trail stops for about 2 miles in Rosemount and then continues down to Hastings. And I said, well, how did you navigate that? And they said, well, it was real hard, because one way we could go to get back on the trail was go down a gravel road that a lot of truck traffic is using, and they use it almost every day, 7 days a week. The other way we could get to the other side of the trail was to go out on Highway 55 on the shoulder. Well, both ways, you can imagine, are real tragic for this family. And they said, you know, they just couldn't understand why we stopped the trail there and continued. Well, I have, as you said, a very knowledgeable former representative, now county commissioner, with me today, and I'm going to ask him to get into the weeds of this project. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Representative. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner.
Thank you, and good morning. It's nice to be back. I miss a lot of my former colleagues. I really don't miss your schedule very much, but I respect it, and I appreciate the opportunity. Let me start first by saying thank you to Representative Huot for providing or authoring this bill, and for you, Madam Chair, for hearing it, but also to this committee and to the legislature for the past support of this. This is a magnificent trail. But it's also a very risky trail. Designed to run all the way from Lake Itasca to the Gulf of Mexico. And we started, Madam Chair, last century. I know you were talking about, so in 1992, we started the Dakota County portion, 27 miles long. Now attracts over 200,000 users a year that go all the way from Representative Claflin's and Representative Hansen's district in the north to Representative Juergen's district in the south. Just incredibly popular. And literally the last time I was on it, I can attest to what Representative Huot said, which is I was following a family, mom, dad, 3 little kids on bikes. They got to the end of this, and it was spectacular views all along the way, the Rock Island Swing Bridge, the Kaposia-Metzen Parkway. There's all kinds of beautiful stuff in the north and beautiful stuff down at Hastings. They got to the end of the trail. They get on this gravel stretch. So picture mom, dad, 3 little kids now, They're on a gravel stretch. You've got semi trucks coming up the road on the one side, and you got a train on the other. And then combine that with a skewed railroad. So you know you got to approach that at a 90-degree turn, or your tires get stuck in there, and you fall down. So yeah, all these things are in play, and I'm back probably a half a mile just praying to God that nothing bad happens to this little family. That's what Representative Huot's bill helps us address. And it's part of a larger, the connectivity of these trails. We're trying to bring all these trails together. And it's actually part, you'll see in your handout, it's very small, but we've got, what I've circled here is the gap. It's part of a larger effort in Dakota County to plug these gaps. Madam Chair, you hit it on the head in your comments introducing the committee earlier to these projects. We've got a lot of these gaps. This one typifies, exemplifies the sort of issues, particularly in a county. Dakota County is now almost 10% of the state's population. We have a ton of use of these trails, and we have a ton of conflicts between cars and trucks and pedestrians and bicyclists and hikers and walkers that are using these trails in these gap areas. So our larger, the map reflects all of our projects. The one that I've circled here is that 1.3 mile gap that I highlighted earlier. But with that, Madam Chair, and I should finish where I started, which is, again, thank you. This group has been supportive, the legislature has been supportive, making investments. We've partnered with the federal government as well. Local cities have pitched in, and then, of course, the county has borne the lion's share of the responsibility and providing the resources and the staffing to make these trails happen. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any, and there are no roundabouts. I just wanted to point that out.
Talk about the money.
What, I'm sorry?
Talk about your ask.
The ask is a portion of it. The last estimate we had was in excess of $6 million. This is a very, very challenging section when you're trying to avoid coming into contact with the rail lines, and then you've got industrial land on either side of it. And so we're willing to step up and do our part, but it's just an awesome ask for an individual county or individual cities. And so that's why, Madam Chair, we're here and the $2.5 million would be very helpful in making this project go forward. We'd love to have you be there to finally bring the two ends of the trail together and cut that ribbon with us.
And has there been meetings, or is this
Have there
still
been
in
meetings?
the very planning stage?
Oh, no, we're ready. There have been so many meetings, Madam Chair, dating back. I mean, literally, we knew this was going to be a challenging section dating back to the early 1990s. So there have been meetings with the industrial neighbors, the residential neighbors, the railroads. We think now we may have, we've got it solved, but we've got kind of a funding crunch to get it done.
Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Atkins, could you just clarify where the location of this project is? Is it on our map? Is it just to the right or the east of where it says 57B? I see several circles on here. I'm just
Yeah,
not
if
sure.
you see the number 57B and then 54, right in between 57B and 54.
That circle.
So there, you'll see it, and it's now a tiny little gap, but it's a very expensive and challenging gap that will complete that trail.
Okay, I just want to clarify because there are several circles on there, and I was pretty sure that was the area that we were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Commissioner Atkins, does this cross the railroad?
Currently, if
the
right
trail.
now you cross the railroad.
Trail crosses
The
the
trail
railroad.
stops on one end, Representative Erdahl, and it stops coming from the Hastings direction from the south. It stops as well. So right now, all of these folks that use the trail cross over the railroad, and they cross it at a skewed, in a skewed fashion.
Madam Chair.
Representative Erdahl.
Commissioner Atkins, is this I've made, I think, at least 2 trips to this area. Is this the railroad that we walked across a couple years ago?
I believe it. I'm almost certain,
Atkins.
Madam Chair and Representative Erdahl, I'm almost certain it is.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee.
Representative Lehman, would you do the minutes, please?
I'd be happy to move the minutes, Madam Chair.
Representative Lehman moves the adoption of the minutes as printed. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Number 8 on the agenda, House File 397, Representative Noor.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members.
Morning, welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm here to present House File 397. This is a pedestrian bike bridge over I-94 on the 22nd Avenue in Minneapolis in my district. In fact, it connects the Huot neighborhood to the West Bank, which is Sea Riverside in that area. So the community in that area utilizes the bridge predominantly. Quite frankly, I have lived in both sides. I lived on the Huot side, and my kids have played and have used that bridge multiple times. And every time that we go over there with their bikes, I usually, I'm always afraid that something will happen. And yes, they have been trying to use that steep ramp that exists, and there's no lightning. So even if that you stay on the other side, which is on the park, it's called Murphy Park, by the way. So whenever we go there in the evenings, it's really tough to cross on their own because they'll be afraid with their mom and so many other things. So even with a disability unit just across the street, they don't use that bridge because of the way it has been constructed. And quite frankly, it has been rated poor by MnDOT. And this bill has been before this committee several times. And I think this is a time that we need to look into how we can put money, dollars into putting a new bridge that will be in compliance with ADA and will also provide safety, because students from University of Minnesota, Augsburg University, the community who live on the other side, use that bridge. And even if you're going to the hospital, to Health Partners, Fairview, many of those institutions, this is the connector to the other side of the bridge. And we'll be bringing some of the experts. We've had several community meetings, and they will present with me. And I have Scott, and he will be able to walk us through the process.
Mr. Schaefer.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Scott Schaefer. I'm the Community Planning Coordinator for Seward Redesign, which is a nonprofit community development corporation based in the Seward neighborhood of Minneapolis. And I'm urging you to support Representative Noor's bill to appropriate funds to support the construction of a bicycle and pedestrian bridge here. So for the last 2 years, I've been working with MnDOT staff and community members to identify community needs for these crossings of I-94 between Seward and the West Bank neighborhoods, including this bridge, the pedestrian bike bridge that we call the Murphy Park Bridge. And I think some context is important first. As Representative Noor stated, there's a lot of job density and residential density in these two neighborhoods, Cedar Riverside, the West Bank to the north, and Seward to the south. There's the Fairview Health Services and Augsburg University just north of the freeway, as well as Murphy Square Park, Minneapolis' oldest city park. And just south of the freeway, there's high-density housing, including Seward Square Apartments, which is right at the corner of 22nd Avenue and the freeway, which is 81 units of affordable housing for people with disabilities. And then further south, the Franklin Avenue Business Corridor. And next, it's important to understand the condition of the bridge. I've included a couple photos of the bridge. It was built in 1962 when I-94 was just a long gravel trench. And it's it's hidden mid-block between the streets and behind an apartment building, resulting in the safety and visibility issues that Representative Noor talked about. And it's too narrow for two people using wheelchairs to go side by side across the bridge. And maybe most important, the ramps are about, the grade is about 11%, which is much higher than the ADA requirements. You know, just as a personal anecdote, I'm not a big guy, but even when I walk across the bridge, it shakes some. And so we've talked a lot to MnDOT and to the community members and their, you know, our consensus around the improvements that we'd like to see in a new bridge. We'd like to see, well, first off, a new bridge or replacement that would align with 22nd Avenue so that you'd have a you know, visual connection from the West Bank to the Seward neighborhood, and that it should be wider and compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, especially because of the proximity of that 81-unit apartment building that has, you know, many people who use wheelchairs. You know, so far we've received written statements of support from many organizations, from neighborhood organizations, from business associations, from the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and from the City of Minneapolis Public Works Department. And so with that, I'd like to allow Ayaan Isaak to speak a little bit more about the community need.
Hello, again, my name is Ayaan Isaak, and I work with neighborhood outreach, and I see that bridge is shaky, and when I saw a lot of disabled people talking about the bridge and pedestrian bridge, it's not good. And, you know, when you go into the bridge, they said, oh, by the wheelchair, it's difficult. And that's when I heard it's really something we need to fix it. When I hear about 1962, I always scared to go under the bridge. And, yeah, it's something we need to get attention. Sorry about my English.
All right, Mr. Isaac.
Madam Chair, I'd like to invite Jim Wellner.
Mr. Wellner.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Jim Wellner. I own, and my wife own Wellner Hardware in the Seward neighborhood. I'm also on the board of directors for the Seward Civic and Commerce Association, an association of about 100 members, and I've been working with Representative Noor and and Scott and Redesign on this issue for several years. The one thing I think I can add to this is that this Interstate 94, which divided these two neighborhoods many years ago, 40% of the residents that live within the corridor adjacent to Franklin Avenue do not have a car. So this is a very unique situation to many neighborhoods in the state where people have to be able to walk or use their bicycles to be able to cross and come back and forth between the neighborhoods. And so as a longtime business member of the community, I have observed the difficulties that this bridge and the condition of it create for the community. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, excuse me, I'd like to invite Steve Peacock.
Mr. Peacock.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Steve Peacock, and my role is Director of Community Relations at Augsburg University. Augsburg University is an anchor institution rooted in place for just under 150 years in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, committed to contributing to the health, safety, vitality, and equity of the community in which we're located. Augsburg faculty, staff, and students are encouraged and supported to take full advantage of our urban location. However, the connection between Augsburg and the neighborhood immediately to our south, the Seward neighborhood, is made much difficult by the divide, both physical and perceived, created by the freeway. The Augsburg campus, as you can see from the images, is located right on the north end of the existing pedestrian bridge. As others have described, this bridge has many deficiencies. The ramps are too steep, it's too narrow, it's dark, and it's disconnected from the street grid. It feels remote and unsafe, as others have said. And as a result, it diminishes that connection between the Seward neighborhood, Augsburg University, and the broader Seward neighborhood. In an effort to strengthen that connection, Augsburg has been working collaboratively with various community stakeholders, Representative Noor, and others, to pursue the replacement of the existing deficient pedestrian bridge with a new bridge aligned with 22nd Avenue South. This new bridge would yield many benefits to the community, including it would draw more people, including faculty, staff, and students from Augsburg University, from the University of Minnesota, over to the Seward neighborhood, particularly to the East Franklin Business District, where Wellna Hardware, other restaurants, and community organizations are located. As has been mentioned, Murphy Square Park sits right in the middle of the Augsburg campus, right on the north end of this bridge. This park is designated by the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board as the park for the North Seward neighborhood, yet access to that bridge is very limited because of the deficiencies in the bridge. So from an equity point of view and access point of view, it's very important to have improved access to that park for the lower income families that reside right across the freeway in Seward. The new bridge will provide Seward residents, and as Jim mentioned, many of whom do not have cars, access to the job centers right across the freeway at Augsburg, at Fairview, the University of Minnesota, and Health Partners, also an access and equity issue. And finally, this bridge, through an engaged community planning process led by Seward Redesign, really serves as a model for how neighborhoods that have been divided by the freeway can come together, reestablish a physical connection, and create a strong, equitable access point for neighborhood residents. Thank you very much.
Does your Reconnecting Neighborhood plan have any amount of money that you're considering?
Madam Chair, I'm working with the MMB to get a physical note on this. This has been before the capital investment a while back, so we will get an updated amount soon.
Okay. Any other questions about this particular bridge, pedestrian? Representative Dean.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Noor and testifiers. You show us an image of the existing sort of bridge and entryway on it, but no images of what the future is. Is it not even in that far in consideration of design yet, or is something already been worked on and you just don't have it in format to present us at this time?
Representative Noor or
Madam Chair.
Schaefer.
Madam Chair and Representative Dean, there's consensus around the design elements that the community would like to see, but we feel it would be misleading to present any rendering of what it would look like without a budget or without work from MnDOT engineers.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sauke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the issue of something to visualize for those of us that are trying to look at this and see the future, I was struck by the fact that you pointed out the current bridge is very narrow and it's inadequate in a lot of reasons because of its grade issues and the narrow part. Even in terms of concept, can you tell me how wide you're intending the new connector to be? Because I can imagine actually something that's more like a roof connection across the interstate so that the neighborhoods, I know, I understand, I just spent 7 banks worth of money, but that idea of connecting neighborhoods with a large space rather than just another narrow space to walk through. So there's my.
Sorry, Madam Chair and Representative Sauke, we'd like it to be as wide as possible, 20, 24 feet. But we've looked at other recent pedestrian bridges that MnDOT has constructed and approved. The 24th Street Bridge across 35W, there are designs up for that. It's under construction right now. The McCubbin and Grotto bridges in St. Paul over I-94 I'm actually not sure what the widths are, but those were constructed, I think, in 2016. And those would be a drastic improvement over what exists there now.
And if I could add, a few years ago, we did a community design charrette process with two consultants, Tom Osland and Linda Figg. And they, after meeting with the community, after examining current conditions, they came up with kind of a conceptual, very aspirational design for the bridge. We can share those designs, but again, very aspirational. The width of that particular concept, I believe, was 18 feet and had many other features that really would create a connection that would be an asset to both neighborhoods.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, a couple of questions here. One is, I know with the MnDOT list here, this was MnDOT, right, that rated this as poor. Just wondering, we've heard about the grade issues and the width issues and the perception of maybe being an unsafe area, and I totally understand that. I'm wondering what MnDOT, what's their criteria to rate this as poor? And then my second question is there a way to fix a lot of these issues on the current bridge, you know, fixing the grade, making it more safe, better lighting, that type of thing? Is that a possibility rather than building a completely new bridge?
Representative Noor.
Madam Chair, I don't know if someone from MnDOT is around to respond to what is their criteria. I don't know what is their criteria, so if they can explain. If not, I think from their deficiency and discussions in the community, this needs to be replaced totally. They cannot do a small piece of fixing the way that it was constructed. So I'm looking forward to getting more information from MnDOT so that they can clarify that information.
Mr. Schaefer.
Madam Chair and Representative Bennett, as far as I understand it, the criteria by which MnDOT rated this bridge poor is its compliance with the Americans with Disability Act and the grade issues, as well as the width issues. It's substandard in its width. And the other condition issue that I included a figure on here, but I failed to mention, is the vertical clearance under the bridge between the bottom of the bridge and the freeway. The current standard that MnDOT has for pedestrian bridges is 17.4 feet, and this bridge at its lowest point over the freeway is 14.4 feet. And so it's 3 feet out of compliance, and if you drive from West Broadway in North Minneapolis on I-94 all the way to the east side of downtown St. Paul, this will be the lowest hanging fixed object over your roof as you drive by a 57-year-old pedestrian bridge. And as far as I understand, there's no way to, rectify that without full replacement of the bridge. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Members of the committee, today we've had a variety of ways to connect people. Culverts, very dangerous. One community doesn't want the kids walking through the culverts. Another community wants a culvert. We have trails, some wide, all dividing, and then they never were brought back to connect. I think we need more information from, and one's a county, and one's a city, and one's another city, and one's a neighborhood organization. So we all these projects have different genesis to them, but all want a final conclusion where they want state money. But there's got to be some common things that are addressed by all the projects. And we have to identify those before we award anything to anybody, I think. And so if you can rack your brains and have little conversations and jot down some of those common things that we need to address for all the trails and culverts and connectiveness projects, I think we'll have a better result at the end.
More
And-
roundabouts.
Pardon?
More roundabouts.
Don't talk to me about I don't have a trail, but I have a roundabout. Just had grand opening in October.
You been around yet?
Oh, I've been around. I spent a couple hours going around and around with the county engineer. It was very good. And then I figured out
Supposed to work, though.
if they had done the access roads separately, maybe we wouldn't even need the roundabout. But now we've got the access roads and the roundabout. But I don't know how I'd feel about riding my bike through it on the roundabout. But I can get to where I'm going if I go a different way. But they do have several more roundabouts planned for my district. Nowhere else, but seems like Mary gets roundabouts. Anyway, that's a topic for another day. Except this was just a mini roundabouts. And then DOT has this big book. I have it. Of roundabouts. You address that, a mini roundabout. They have this big fat book on roundabouts. And that's how I came to know that engineers really like roundabouts.
In a roundabout way.
And, holy cow. And my roundabout is beautiful.
Nailed it.
But
Madam Chair?
I remember when there were cows and horses in that field. Yes.
Madam Chair, I just had one or two words, I guess. I think public safety is a theme we're hearing today.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one thing they all had in common. And speaking of roundabouts, one of the professors at our community college at my community totaled his van going around a roundabout. So they can be dangerous.
Yeah. Especially if there's not enough room, like Representative Torkelson was bringing with those big trucks. Up here in, well, in St. Paul, there's a little roundabout that I can't imagine any truck getting by, even if just the one that's in the ramp. I can't imagine that getting around the roundabout, but I don't have that engineering skill. But think about this. We've got to keep those kids safe from adventures. But gee, building a culvert and taking away a culvert is probably a good idea. But then the overpasses. But now in the inner city, then they want a wide, all of these, they have to be accessible. And I suppose it's the grading and all that that makes the difference in the money, too. $6 million, $2 million, $12 million. Some of them were for, or one of them anyway, seems to be ready to go. The others seemed like they were 2020 projects rather than 2019 projects. But I don't know. We've got to think about it, and we've got to work out a solution together. Representative Nornes.
Madam Chair, I was just thinking of one other thing. We've had a couple of requests now for the overpasses and so forth. I've been in a couple of states where they actually build overpasses for animals. We haven't had any requests for that I'm aware of in Minnesota. But they have overpasses for wild animals so they can cross the interstate safely.
Oh, like in California.
California, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we just put up signs.
Yeah, and they read them.
Yeah.
Yeah. This meeting is adjourned.